Hi, good afternoon. Sorry we kept you so long. We ran a little late. Could you please describe your program and give any updates on past outcomes and identify yourself, please?
Mr. Chair, I'm Dave Baldwin. I'm the Adjutant General and the Director of the California Military Department. Yeah. Mr. Chair, the three items that are on the agenda today are not in the governor's budget. I'm not cleared for a position on them, but I'd be happy to answer any technical questions that you or the other members might have.
Okay. Can you describe the Work for Warriors program for me?
Sure. Work for Warriors program is a program that was the brainchild of a partner in Speaker Perez's office that we work with the Speaker and his staff on in order to address the big problem that we have with unemployed or underemployed soldiers and airmen from the California National Guard, particularly those that are returning veterans from the deployments overseas. What we did was we took money out that the Speaker had given to us out of his budget rather than going through the governor's budget, so out of his operating funds, and we were able to hire soldiers that serve as counselors for other soldiers and airmen in order to match them with corporations. What's unique about this program is that we partner primarily with a number of very prominent corporations who have made a commitment to hiring veterans and give us first shot at any job vacancies they have. Our counselors then work with our soldiers and airmen to ensure that they're presentable, that they have their resumes done, and then we specifically match through a database the talented soldiers and airmen that we have with the employers that are working. The program has been tremendously successful, and it's among, if not the most cost-effective veterans placement program of any that are out there. Average programs, a lot of the federal programs spend about $10,000 per placement. We're placing soldiers and airmen at the rate of $400 per person. To date, we've placed 2,400 soldiers and airmen just from the California National Guard.
Great. Right now, the program is currently funded from the Assembly discretionary funds, that I understand. Considering the program's success, your cost-benefit analysis is pretty remarkable on what you're doing. So I'm going to hear from the Department of Finance and LAO.
John Fitzpatrick, Department of Finance. We don't currently have a position or a recommendation for this new proposal for the Work for Warriors program.
Okay. And LAO?
We don't have anything to add either.
Okay. I know the Speaker has really put a lot of effort into this program. He really believes in it. The Assembly, I believe, has believe there's some merit. So I'm going to have some of my colleagues, if they have any questions before I hear from public comment.
No, I just moved to approve.
Okay. Well, I would.
When you're ready.
Yes. Then, is there any public comment before we move? All right. I will entertain a motion to approve $570,000 from the general fund and add 5.0 state active duty positions to department's baseline budget in support of the program. And can I second, or I don't know, second?
Yeah, we're done.
Then we'll wait for the others.
Jones Sawyer. Jones Sawyer.
Aye.
Harkey.
And we'll hold it open for one more vote. Okay, then we'll go on to the National Guard Challenge Program. Same thing. Please describe the existing program and give an update on your past outcomes.
Mr. Chair, again, this is another ad that is not in the governor's budget, so we're not cleared for a position. The California Youth Challenge Program is a program that's done in partnership with the Department of Defense and the National Guard Bureau. 75% of the funding for this program comes from the federal government, and the states match 25%. We have two existing programs here in the state. They focus on at-risk youth, or youth that have already fallen through the gaps in the systems in our school system and have either already failed out of high school or are on the path to fail. We do take some youthful offenders, provided that they don't have any violent felonies, so we work with these kids. We put them in a military environment. We partner with two school districts right now, one in Orange County and one in San Luis Obispo County. They have civilian teachers. They're on a very strict regimented schedule. And what we do with the program is take these kids that were failing from school and turn them into students that have 3.5 and 4.0 GPAs, and they go on to job placements into the military and some into college. The proposal, as I understand it, is to open up a third program in the city of Stockton. The federal government does have committed to make the money available for their 75% match, and this proposal would ask for the other 25%. But again, we don't have a position on this.
Okay. And how are the sites chosen?
The sites are chosen by first finding a willing school district that will partner with us to either do a charter school or a community-based school. We also look for support of the community, support of the members, but the most important factor for us are the facilities. The two existing programs that are at two of our bases, Camp San Luis Obispo, which is a state-owned facility in San Luis Obispo County, and then at Los Alamitos Joint Forces Training Base in Orange County, because at those facilities we have everything we need: classrooms, we have chow halls, and we have, most important, barrack space. So we can't just take over an existing school. There's an opportunity in Stockton with a facility with the closure of the Ren Army base there that is attractive for opening up a new school.
Okay, thank you. And then can you kind of describe the funding mechanism if you...
Again, the funding, 75% of the funds come from the federal government.
Okay.
They pay for operating costs and for the staff, including the teachers. 25% comes from the state government.
Okay, thank you. And I do believe we have Assembly Member Susan Eggman here, who I believe is very familiar with the program.
I'm very familiar with the program and very familiar with the site. So I'm just here to add my voice to theirs to say, indeed, San Joaquin County would greatly benefit from a program like this. As the general said, there's one in San Luis Obispo, there's one in Los Alamitos, there's not one in Northern California. They turn away hundreds of kids a year. As anyone who pays attention to the news and listens to me talk, you know, my city of Stockton and San Joaquin County has record unemployment rates, very high dropout rates, a huge problem with crime and violence, which are highly correlated to dropout rates. And we think this is a prime site for it. We've got a bill. This is separate from the bill, but it's a bipartisan effort to say this would be a great program to beat here. Also, as a professional social worker, I've looked at the efficacy studies. This is one of the most successful programs in the nation. And one of the things that people don't always know about the National Guard, it's, you know, to protect and serve us, but also really to provide some of these kinds of services. And so this is, I think, a prime example of how they really give back to communities. And we would just really hope that that we would be able to get that allocation, 25%, and then we get 75%. That's a deal right there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything from the Department of Finance? The LAO. Ms. Harkey, do you have any questions?
I just want to either ask DOF or LAO. I mean, it sounds like it's a reasonable proposal, and it's definitely a high match for what we're putting in. Have you done any analysis on this? Or?
We were recently made aware of this proposal and have not done an analysis as of this time.
Okay, I'd be willing to move it, but I'd like to see something before it got to the floor.
You'd like to see what?
I'd like to see
More
some,
detail.
Okay.
just a,
Sure.
a quickie analysis. I mean, if it is what it is, it seems like it's a no-brainer. but
Yeah,
it might-
and because I would also just add that we know the cost of incarceration and dropouts and violence compared to this small investment. I think you can really see the scales tip.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And it sounds like Ms. Harkey is going to move that we augment the department's baseline budget by $1.5 million in support of a program expansion to one additional campus. And it will be so noted. We're making Mr. Baldwin a little uncomfortable, but we're going to move this. We're going to move this along. This is the first time I've ever seen you trying to give somebody money, and they're a little uncomfortable, but I understand. Yes. And get some more information from the Department of Finance and LAO on this motion. And so we have a motion from Ms. Harkey, second from Mr. Rodriguez.
Jones Sawyer.
Aye.
Harkey. Rodriguez. Motion passes 3-0.
go back to the previous? Yeah. We're going to quickly go back to Work for Warriors. Issue 1 for the military. That's good to. So we're going to go back to Work for Warrior for approval. Call the roll. Who's the missing members?
For military department, issue number 1, Work for Warriors, we're adding on Mr. Rodriguez. Aye. Aye, Rodriguez. Stone. Aye, Stone. Motion passes 4-0. And then going back to add on for military department, issue number 2, Mr. Stone. Aye, Stone. Passes 4-0.
Thank you. Now we're on a computer network defense team.
Yes, Mr. Chair, yet another issue that I have no opinion on, and I'm not cleared for a position. But I will tell you that recently the National Guard Bureau, the United States Army, the United States Air Force have been fielding computer network defense teams, cyber team, protection teams into the National Guard. We fielded one of those teams here in California. It's a federally funded team, but it's part-time only. One of their missions is to take the skill sets that we use in order to defend the nation's Department of Defense military computer infrastructure against adversaries and threats, to make those skill sets available and those tools available to state government by use of this team. The Speaker found some interest in this and offered us money from his own operating account from the Assembly's discretionary fund in order for us to put those soldiers and airmen on full-time status. And since he's done that, we've visited 23 state agencies, found quite a few vulnerabilities, addressed a lot of ways that those agencies can protect their networks, save the state money, certainly simply by the fact that any one of those teams, if they had gone out to a private contractor, would have come in and maybe charged $200,000 per assessment. We don't charge anyone at all. We just go and do it as a service because we think that's part of our mission to help protect the state, including in the cyber realm. So we've saved money, quite a bit of money there, let alone the money that we may have saved by preventing an attack or an intrusion, particularly in those agencies that have citizens' personal information that could be exploited.
And I know we've been reading the news, cyber attacks both outside the country, inside the country. I mean, hacking has been a huge problem, and I think it's really not only commendable, but the Speaker to have the foresight to invest in that, and sometimes we have to do that and to be able to see it ahead of time. And so I'm hoping that we move this along also. But are there any? I have a feeling there isn't any, but we'll try the Department of Finance. Do you have any comments?
No comments at this time.
Any LAO?
No comments.
And is there any public comment? Okay. So I would love for someone to approve 6 permanent positions and $884,000 from the general fund in 2014 and $774,000 in 2015-16 and ongoing. It was moved by Mr. Stone and seconded by Mr. Rodriguez. A definite saving. So let's move on.
Jones Sawyer.
Aye.
Harkey.
I'm laying off for a little more information. I appreciate the chair's motion.
Rodriguez. Stone. Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Mr.
Victim Compensation Program. We're on our last 2 items. Victims Compensation and Government Claims Board. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'm Wayne Strumfer. I'm the Chief Counsel and Legislative Director for Victim Compensation and Government Claims Board.
You may begin.
Thank you. I just want to give a quick overview of our victim compensation program. This past year, we served over 54,000 applicants, and with over
Right.
$61 million over the past previous years. That's been fairly consistent. Our program serves crime victims in California involving physical injury or threat of physical injury with emotional injury. Certain types of crime that we help with: domestic violence, child abuse, sexual assault, homicide, robbery, drunk driving, vehicle manslaughter. We offer a number of different services, including medical, dental treatment, mental health, income loss, funeral and burial expenses, job retraining, home security, and relocation. Over the past several years, our application average processing time has dropped. In 11-12, it was 64 days. Last year, it was 54 days. Over the past several years, we've also worked closely with victim groups, including the Victim Witness Assistance Association, the Crime Victim Action Alliance, the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence, Crime Victims United, and the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault. We meet on a quarterly basis to meet with victim advocates to discuss issues and to make sure that we're continuing to compensate in an appropriate way and to work with the victims groups.
Okay. Department of Finance.
Jay Sturgis, Department of Finance. I think this was just an informational item at this
I
point.
didn't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, nothing to add
LAO
to that.
5020. And is there any public comment?
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Linda Siegel, and I figure I'm older than dirt looking around here in terms of working with victims. I've been working with victims from all of your communities and from across the United States for some 50 years now. And in California, this program is very different from other programs. First of all, although we serve some 56,000 applicants a year, there are nearly 50% that never get an award. They submit an application but say zero award. This is from the program executive officer's statement a couple years ago in a committee, and I don't think it's changed much. So that takes that number down to half. Of that half, in California we take an application for each family member involved in the crime, whereas in other states they may take one application per crime and take a mom, a dad, and 2 children, or however many are in the family. There's an average, I believe, of about 3 per family, which takes us down to serving 10,000 crimes. So there's a lot of room for expansion in this program. Because it's a little different from anything you deal with, because it's penalty assessment fund, it's non-tax fund, you're not making an allocation, it's not going from one pot to another. It's an easy fund to deal with, but also difficult. There's a federal share of some 60% that goes into the pot, but it's only on services that are paid out for victims. So when you see a dramatic drop like this 96 million down to 61 million, you're losing federal share. You're losing a lot of federal share. And if there's a shortfall, that's part of the reason. So it's very important to keep the payments to victims up no matter what. Right now the program is complicated. It's had a lot of money drop out of it, and the most impoverished victims have the most difficulty accessing the fund. They don't have computers, they don't have transportation, they sometimes are illiterate, they sometimes have no transportation, and these are largely domestic violence and child abuse victims. So improving access to the fund is a good idea. Other states also have their grant funding, which we fund through OES out of the penalty assessment fund at the federal level, and their comp funding under one umbrella. And for some reason, the victims in California have kind of continually been placed with this comp board suing the state for money and contracts and general government instead of in a place for their own. By having them under the same umbrella, you can transfer money between them instead of replicating using some victim money for these programs that are about to speak that are very fine programs. And if we could see them everywhere in the state, it would be a wonderful thing for victims. And the OES funds that are also grant funds, and they're a little bit better set up to do grants than a comp fund. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
No, that was great. Thank you, ma'am.
All right.
Are there any questions from staff? I mean, from members, I'm sorry. It's a long day. Okay, we've been getting some claims and stories about some problems with the claims process from victims and their advocates, and we've also heard some great stories, some great success stories of interactions with staff and the claims process. We really would like for you to get together with both sides, because I believe when you hear two sides of a story, generally in the middle is the real truth, and I think it could be worked out if a dialogue occurs. And obviously do it quickly, and clarification on the claims process probably be really, really helpful. This was a no recommendation discussion item only, but we wanted to bring that to the forefront.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And then update on the Trauma Recovery Center grant program. Is that Victim Compensation Claims Board? Alicia Basilari, PhD, Chief Psychology Director, Division of Psychosocial Medicine, Department of Psychiatry, San Francisco General Hospital, UCF School of Medicine.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm Dr. Alicia Basilari, and I direct the Trauma Recovery Center in San Francisco. I want to thank you for giving me a chance to talk about the Trauma Recovery Center that originated in San Francisco and that is currently being replicated in Los Angeles and Long Beach. The Trauma Recovery Center was initially created a number of years ago in partnership with the Victim Compensation Program. The Victim Compensation Program were active partners with us, and we developed the TRC model of care. Much of what was accomplished at the San Francisco Trauma Recovery Center would not have been possible without the help of the state legislature and the Victim Compensation Program. With that being said, there are some problems associated with the current claims-based model through the Victim Compensation Program. These are problems that are probably inherent in any claims-based program. And in fact, the TRC model was created to decrease barriers to care and to provide a comprehensive menu of services to victims of violence. It serves as an alternative to the current fee-for-service victim compensation program. There have been several studies that suggest that applying for services through the victim compensation process may be complex, may be inefficient, and may be overly time-consuming for victims. A Bureau of Audit report revealed that 30% of victim applications take more than 3 months to process, and we heard today that in many cases it's now down to 54 days to process an application, or that's close to 2 months. It's important to recognize that many victims of violence do not have money to pay for out-of-pocket mental health treatment or medication or other expenses while they wait those 60 days to find out if their application has been approved or denied. And it may then take another 3 to 6 months for their bills to be paid. Simply put, many victims go without getting served in a timely fashion or without getting served at all. And of course, this delay can make their situation worse. We know that approximately 50% of people who survive a traumatic, violent event experience crippling psychological difficulties unless they are given some form of effective and timely services. We know that the delay of treating post-traumatic stress disorder is associated with poor outcomes. This is just not about feeling bad. People who have been shot or raped or who have had a family member murdered often begin a downward spiral into being unable to work, having a loss of income, bankruptcy, loss of housing, and loss of medical insurance. It's a costly consequence to both the victim and the community. The TRC model has been empirically shown to be more accessible to victims of violent crime, as well as more clinically and cost-effective than the usual system of care. The model that we use is a flexible and comprehensive approach. It emphasizes community outreach, clinical case management, trauma-focused mental health services, and we also coordinate our care across medical, legal, social services, and it helps increase the victim's cooperation with law enforcement. And I just want to just briefly give you an example of the kind of case, a kind of patient that we saw that was able to access this model of care. This is a woman in her 50s who had a 31-year-old daughter, and her 18-year-old son and her 3-year-old grandson were all shot during a drive-by shooting in San Francisco. Her 31-year-old daughter died, and her son and grandson were left with serious injuries. She was left raising her daughter's 6 children, as well as her own 3 children. Her son-in-law had recently died from a medical illness, leaving this patient with sole responsibility for these 9 children. She was forced to quit her job as a security guard and as a part-time hairstylist in order to take care of this expanded family. So here we have this woman totally overwhelmed with grief and now taking care of this extended family. She was afraid to leave her home. She was afraid to let the children leave her home. We ended up finding her at San Francisco General, where her son was being treated for the injuries related to the shooting. And we literally go into the hospital and we look for victims of crime. We were able to find her there, and we were able to immediately begin doing home visits to her home to be able to get her to be able to leave her home safely. We were able to find appropriate housing to move the family out of the neighborhood they were living in, and to be able to accommodate this growing family of hers. She was unable to work due to the severe post-traumatic stress disorders, and we were able to help her get financial entitlements through Social Security. We were able to help her file for victim compensation benefits. And she now had 9 children she had to travel around with. We were able to leverage community resources and had an SUV donated to the family. We also were able to help her gain legal custody of her grandchildren, and also work with the police department and the district attorney's office. In any event, this model that we have developed is very different from the usual model of care, which does not include outreach or case management or what we would call psychological first aid, and it does not include the kind of advocacy work. So we were very pleased when the state legislature last year moved to replicate this model in Long Beach and in Los Angeles. And I sat here this afternoon, and I was very pleased to hear how much emphasis is being placed on outcomes. And there's a handout going around the outcomes that are associated with the Trauma Recovery Center, where we were able, we did one of the largest randomized treatment trials in the country, looking at victim services in the public sector, and we were able to show that this model increased return to work by 56%, reduced homelessness by 41%, increased cooperation with law enforcement that led to a 69% increase in the number of police reports filed. And we were also able to do a cost analysis, which shows that this model of care is 34% cheaper than the fee-for-service model that is currently in operation in California. For example, our cost is $66 a unit as compared to $102 per unit of usual care. In summary, I again want to thank all of you for giving me a chance to talk to you about this model, and I really appreciate that it's being replicated, and I'm hoping that the funding for it can continue. And I would also like to thank our partners at the Victim Compensation Program as well.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Department of Finance.
Yes, Jay Sturgis, Department of Finance. We would note that the governor's budget 2014-15 does include a $2 million funding for this program to continue in 14-15.
LAO?
We'd just like to add that there is evidence that this program is effective at expanding access to victims' benefits. The Restitution Fund can support it. And also, we'd like you to consider evaluations of each center that accepts grants on an ongoing basis, just to ensure, to compare how it compares to traditional victim services in terms of effectiveness and cost.
Any committee members have any questions?
Question. How are, say, hospitals and organizations able to access the type of grants? I know it says go to the board's website. Which website is that they talk about for more information and to apply for the grants?
It's the Victim Compensation and Government Claims Board.
Now, is there certain criteria that they have to? Do you know what any of those are by chance?
Yes, yes. There's the scoring criteria for these grants. We look at a number of things. We look at the grantee's ability to provide mental health services. We look at their ability to provide assertive community-based outreach and clinical case management. We look to see about their coordination of care among medical and mental health care providers, law enforcement, crime victim services, and others. We also looked at their services of family members and loved ones in homicide cases. And we look to the multidisciplinary staff of the clinicians that include licensed psychiatrists, psychologists, and social workers.
Okay. And for this next phase of funding, when's the period that they start to accept applications? Do you know?
This summer.
Oh, summer? Mm-hmm. Would it be, I guess, from August to October like it was last year?
We hope to be a little faster this year because last year we didn't have the law go in place until July 1, and it was for this fiscal year. So this year we're already moving ahead now and preparing. So we should be a little bit ahead of that schedule from last year.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Ms. Melendez, do you have any questions? You can only ask on this one. You can't go backwards. So. Public comment?
Good afternoon. Melena Blake with Californians for Safety and Justice. We also have a statewide network of crime survivors called Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. We're about 6,000 members all across the state. And our leadership team and our members love the Trauma Recovery Center. We were, in part because of the request from our leadership team, we were proud to sponsor a bill last year, SB 580, which was then in turn turned into the budget process that allowed for this $2 million grant to occur. The Trauma Recovery Center is beyond remarkable. One of the top priorities for Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice is to remove barriers to health and healing for crime victims across the state, and the TRC does that. It is the one-stop shop for people who need help to get that help without having to seek it out, and I think that's a huge barrier for a lot of our members to, first of all, admit that they need help and then to go out and get it. So to have it in the communities that they're in, to have it be so accessible and so holistic and really healing people, not just about receiving specific check boxes of services. So I definitely would encourage the committee to continue this funding. I would definitely encourage the committee to expand the funding if that's at all possible, and certainly in future years. The other thing I wanted to say is that I would be happy to work with our Crime Survivor Network to find specific examples of people who had both good and bad experiences applying to the Victim Compensation Fund to get specific cases, and we can figure that out to get specific information for the committee and committee staff. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and again, just really strongly want to encourage this model, the Trauma Recovery Center. Thank you.
That would be extremely helpful if you can get together with one of our witnesses.
Yeah, we'd be happy to work with you.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Linda Siegel, and I would strongly support this program and urge that you replicate it wherever possible in the state. I would also urge you to give some funds to this program to act as a training and technical assistance center for the new programs and help with the evaluation, maybe centralize the evaluation. It was puzzling to me that they took this $2 million and spread it out. One program gets 2.2 years, one gets 1 year, and one gets 2.5 years. That's a little unwieldy, and it would be better if each program had an annual appropriation. You're working with a surplus above and beyond the board's prudent surplus of $30 million of another $40 million, so you have a lot of funding to draw on.
Thank you. And I'll just briefly say we've had several meetings on justice reinvestment. In the last one we had, there was an extensive discussion from women who had been formerly incarcerated, and it talks about prison post-stress traumatic syndrome and how difficult it was to get reacclimated. And so I think what you're doing, it fits right in to that because it's because we don't see it. We don't think it exists, and we really do need to put in that type of funding. And I believe one of my colleagues will make a recommendation to do a $2 million grant program, make it permanent, and have, according to the LAO and their suggestion, and give update status to reflect, effectiveness and permanency. Is there a motion? Second.
Jones Sawyer.
Aye.
Rodriguez. Stone. Melendez. Motion passes 3-0. Would you like to add on?
All of it. He wasn't here. And thank you. Thank you. It was great. Thank you.
All right.
Staff.
Add-on vote for the vote-only issue, Military Department. Aye. Melendez. Motion passes 5-0. Add-on for the Work for Warriors program. Aye. Melendez. Motion passes 5-0. Add-on item for the Challenge program. Aye. Melendez. Motion passes 5-0. Just want to do cybersecurity. Okay. All right. And not voting on cybersecurity. Motion passes 3-0.
Are we done? This Assembly Budget Subcommittee number 5 is now adjourned.